it's still viewable. I'm going to create a simple project. Just we are going to write a simple code to see how IndexedDB is working, and afternoon if you have a time probably we'll see. I probably will migrate the previous code into IndexedDB specific one. So as usual, a standard HTML5 project. And only one difference we are going to make, because I found that's a problem with the Chrome. If you have other browser, that's different. I mean, other browser, I mean, other than Internet Explorer, but unfortunately, you do not have other browsers. So if you are running in Chrome, I won't recommend hitting run and directly run the project using localhost 8383 because it doesn't work. What you can do is, instead of running this way, you can go to the file system, find your NetBeans project where it is located. In my case, it is there in this folder, IndexedDB example public HTML. I would recommend opening through the file system. This will work. I'm running the project through a standard file system, not to be confused with my Macintosh because it has a different file system. For you, maybe C prompt, my documents, NetBeans projects, or something will come. So you have to run through this because morning I was having a little trouble when I tried to create a simple project. It doesn't work when I try to run through the localhost. In fact, we don't need to have a localhost, typically speaking, because if I am porting this application to native devices such as Android and iPhone devices, there it is going to run through the file system only. It is not going to have any host system. So of course we are perfectly fine if I get a result through this way, because this is a real scenario where such app is going to run on a device. After IndexedDB, probably I'll also show a simple way to create how natively we port this application to a device. So that's just for viewing purpose, because I'm not going to demand you also need to export those things, but I'll also show you the way, because that involves various hooks which need to be fixed, and class paths and so on. A lot of things has to be set, but we'll see how things goes on. But before, we'll make sure the IndexedDB to work. So make sure you run through the file system. This is only a simple example of IndexedDB, so I'm not going to have my jQuery added in this case. I don't need it. Maybe for the other project which I have which I wanted to migrate into IndexedDB, that time I may need it. Okay, I'm going to create two global objects. One is DB, database object, which is going to contain the instance of your database. Another one is request. It's just a name, not to be confused with it's some sort of pre-initialized objects. Just a name, relevant name I'm trying to give. It could be any name. Request, which is going to take my request to open such a database if it is there. So request is an instance of window. Most of the time you won't get suggestion because IndexedDB is still evolving standard. NetBeans hasn't updated anything. You have to type it. So IndexedDB dot open. Trying to open a database. A database, it's nothing but a name. For example, if you want to imagine a college is a database. But inside the college, there are tables such as classroom exist. So standard 5, standard 6, standard 7, something like that. So each classroom may be the tables of the particular database, and each table is going to contain list of students as their records. So that's a standard. If you want to imagine in a real world example, you can consider a database. It's a container for all your tables. Now it is going to be a new database. So as you say, any name you can give. mydb.db. Not extension is not necessary, but if you want, you can keep it. Any name will do. So you're trying to create a database if it is not existing. And IndexedDB demands a version number to be maintained. For example, you have a database. You may have a requirement to create a database with some set of tables. Tomorrow you may want to add a couple of other tables, because as your database grows, that time you also need to keep the existing table as well as a new table to be added. So whenever your structure or schema of your database changes, you can increment the database version to hierarchical, so incremental values. So accordingly, new changes, whatever happens, would be added to your existing database. Now it's pretty new. I'm going to keep the version 1. When I make a request to open a database, two possibilities are there. A request may be, may go successful, or request may fail. So apart from that, I also want to give one more explanation. IndexedDB is highly asynchronous. Uh, I have to follow a request response sequence, because asynchronous thing mean nothing is going to be step by step, a line by line is going to be honored. When I make a request, a response may come a little later. I don't know what time it will come. So it's asynchronous one. Same like a document object load or something we had. So I'm going to have a couple of callback methods. Whenever request is successfully goes on, I will be getting a callback in one particular function. If it fails, I'll be getting the information in another method. So that one, on success, if request goes successfully, if it is honored, I'm going to have a callback function. That function has, remember, this way also you can write. I already gave an example. A JavaScript function could also be written in this way. It's going to be having an event which is associated with the request. So if your request is success, you have successfully managed to get access to a database. I'm not going to say you successfully created the database. I'm going to say you got access to the database. Another chance being request on error. Any name could be given, but I would want to have it as an event. If something goes wrong where you fail to get access to your database, you will be called here. But this is only for existing database. What if the database is not at all existing? We have to create the database. That part is still asynchronous, because your JavaScript will try to get access to a database. If database is already there, it will successfully open it, you get access to it. If database is not existing, it will first create and then get an access. So the create part would be triggered on upgrade needed. I'm not sure about the typos, but let's see. So the three possibilities of a methods are the request. One, I'm trying to get an access to a database. First separation happens in this way, whether the database is already existing or it is not. If the scenario, the database is not existing, it will eventually open the database, get access to a database, but it will also create the particular database freshly if it is not existing. If it is already existing, it will simply get an access to it. So in both the case, this particular function IndexedDB.open, it will either open an existing database. If not, it will create the database. So that's the inference we have to get. So In this case, I'm assuming there is no such a database. It is going to create a database and going to give me an access. Okay. How to verify? Of course, you'll see the console log. I'm going to say db loaded some words. Maybe created would be a appropriate word, because if it is not there, this particular line would be executed. If already existing database is there, it won't come, this particular block won't be executed. If the database is fresh, a new one is going to be created, that time only this on upgrade needed part will be executed. And this is particularly true if you change the version number as well. If the version number increased or changed, this part also will be called. Before that, I have an object called db, so I'm going to initialize that. Every request will have their own corresponding result. I would recommend both the side you initialize the db object, because two chances are there: the database may be a fresh one. In such a case, I mean, fresh one mean it is not created, so it has to be created. So we are going to make sure the create instance is also recorded with the database, and as well as the data loaded successfully also get it. Because chances are there either this method together would be called at least, or one method would be called. So any case, the database object would have a corresponding result of your particular object, nothing but the IndexedDB object. So this DB is going to contain the instance of your database or database object. I'm not going to say database itself. So using this DB only, I'm going to do a various transaction. But before that, I have to make sure the database is created successfully or not. After creating database, I have to make sure I create the tables. As far as IndexedDB, I'm not going to say table. I'm going to say them as an object store. But first we have to verify whether my database creation goes successfully or not. Since I'm running in the folder system, file system, I'm just going to hit. If you notice, two lines of code I'm seeing, two console output is coming. One, db initialized created and db loaded successfully, means point one is the database was quite new, it was not existing before, so it made sure the database created first and got access to the database. So this block was executed and then this block was executed. Okay, but if I refresh now, it means the database is already there, because how I see, going to resource tab, if you see the IndexedDB, I have a couple of things because I tested in the morning session. So maybe the one mydb.db something I created now today. Yeah, this one. So there is no table so far, but the database is successfully created. You can't read it, remember, it's not something so easy like local storage and see the schema or something like that. You simply see whether such a thing is created or not. So a database has got created. Eventually, if the database is not existing, it will create the database and get access to the database. If I refresh now, I'll end up getting only one, which is nothing but db loaded successfully, because the obvious reason, the database is already created. So subsequent attempt of refreshing or reloading the page does not call this block. This block would be called only once, that too in the very first time the database is created. You have to be very careful. This block will be executed only once. So it may be the right place to pre-initialize, preload some data. I mean, already have some data loaded into a database, and probably this is the best place to do it. Otherwise, if you mess up something, you messed it up somewhere, something is not working, I would recommend change the database name to something else and force a new database to be created. So once I rename the database name, If you refresh, I'll see twice. A new database has got created, discarding the previous one. So if your schema has got changed, or your table structure or your object store structure changed, I would recommend keep changing the database name until you get a desired result. Or if you are adding some additional tables with existing database, you may go ahead and simply increment the version number. But to make it simple, I'll be using them whenever needed only. I'm not going to use them quite often. Okay, so in my understanding, there is a database called mydb.db exist, and just been initialized, and of course it's ready. But to put into work, we have to do something. Maybe we need a small UI to handle our job. I don't want to create a complex design, but these are all the standard HTML. I'm going to keep a label, or maybe name. I'm going to give very simple. No, I'm not using any jQuery, but if you want, you can still use it. Let me see if I can add something, but before I want to check. Simple, this field set will have certain thing aligned, nothing else. It's not going to give you any kind of specific feature. It's just going to keep it the one line by line or separated, just for my viewing purpose. So what I'm trying to do when I click something, or so when I enter a name, and when I hit on add name, it is going to store the particular content into an index table. Maybe we can have a small table also. Be nice to see along with the table. I prefer jQuery because I'm going to need a table. So I'll put a jQuery for my dynamically adding the table. Otherwise, I'm not going to need. Otherwise, you can use a table, row, or other thing. You can manipulate it, but mostly we use jQuery for that purpose. So I'm going to use jQuery. Remember, I'm going to use only the base framework of jQuery. I'm not using jQuery mobile. Any minified version of jQuery which you already have can be used. This is only for my DOM manipulation. Open another div. Div. I give item ID just because the primary purpose of using the database is to have a unique thing for a record. Plus a heading. So the row could be dynamically added. So T body or table body is going to contain the row which is going to get dynamically added using jQuery. For deleting or editing purpose, I'm just using them. Additional reserving one field. Don't do much. Function I'm just writing, which is going to add a name of the particular user or particular some record to a database. So I'm going to call this name. Name field. Okay, so we need to add a particular user name to a database. I'm going to need additional two objects, but before doing that I need to do further steps. Now I have a purpose of using my IndexedDB. It looks like my application is going to save the users, whatever name I'm going to type, it's going to save. So first thing, to have that done, I need to have a table in place so that the subsequent records can be added. But IndexedDB, we are not going to call that as a table. I'm going to call that as object store. So first part, I need to make sure the object store is created. Request to create an object store like that we can maintain. So an object name db create object store. Creating an object store mean there's a database exists, in that you're going to create a table. So say name db something again, any name. In that you're also going to keep one more field that should be entered as an object because the curly brace I have given. You're going to add one more field which is called, even though the name we are adding item name something like that, I'm going to keep the item ID which is going to maintain the ID for the particular record. So I'm going to give that ID. In IndexedDB that has to be defined as key path. So item ID, and it should be auto increment. Remember camel casing, it's very important. Key P is uppercase, in auto increment I is uppercase. If you do not put in the right camel casing, it won't work. And of course you won't get any suggestion because NetBeans doesn't give me an auto correction or what, something like it doesn't work here. Maybe I don't need a object store because I just have that. I see my table has got created. Create O is uppercase, store S is uppercase. Key path. Remember, I have put this particular line in on upgrade needed. If I refresh the code, it is, I'm only getting a console output stating DB loaded successfully, but it is not initialized because I have modified the schema of my database, because I added one new schema. Schema means a kind of table I added. So I need to make sure that is updated. There are possibilities. I can either increase the version So the table would have got added. If you notice, it has been called initialized. It means just refreshing, having additional options, schemas got added. Otherwise, if you instead of incrementing the value, you can simply change the database name as a whole. Whatever way you prefer, you can do it. Since I have already updated, I'm going to assume I'm going to go ahead with that. But when coding goes quite complex, where you entirely messed up on changing the schema quite a lot, you can simply change the database name to different one, keep a version, start with 1. Only this is helpful if you are issuing an additional table. It is a very rare condition. You won't be adding a table once you issue the application, but if in such a case, you can increment the version to an incremental value such as 2, 3, 4, something like that. You cannot go back. Remember, once you increment it, don't go back to a previous version. So object store, in my understanding, it is created successfully. Now I need to insert record. I'm going to need additional object called transaction. Transaction will give access to the database. Access mean now you can get access to a database in two modes. One is simply for reading purpose or reading as well as modifying. So you need to get a permission, even though you have access to a database called DB, but you still need to get a permission to have the transaction with the record. It could be two possibilities. One is only for reading purpose, another one is manipulating. Add name is going to require reading and modifying permission because I'm physically inserting an item, so which I need a read write permission. So DB transaction. DB has a object called transaction. In this case, if you have multiple tables, same can also be taken, but in this case I have only one. Sorry, instead I'm not going to say tables, I'm going to say if you have multiple object stores, because I have created only one object store, chances are there your database may contain more than one object store. That's the reason the transaction is going to take as a array format, because I'm calling through a square bracket, because if you have more than one object store, you can give them as a comma separated, but in this case I have only one. I'm going to get a permission read write. So I got a permission to do a transaction with the database. Now going to make a request to object. I'll get an instance of an object store to first store. From the transaction, you can get the instance of the object store. I told you the transaction may get a permission of more than one object store, but if you want to retrieve or do an addition to a particular object store, you have to tell which particular object store you are going to do a transaction with now. So in this case, I'm going to add a record to an object store called name table. This is very important. Here we are declaring if I have to get more than one object store with the permission to do a read write, but whereas in this case I'm particularly telling I'm going to do an addition to this particular object store. So twice you need to mention. You got an permission, and now you are going to do a kind of insert, or you're going to insert a value to a object store. So I'm going to make a request to insert. Remember, this is a local object store. Just hit add. Now I'm going to add a object store, but I would recommend insert as an object, even though it is having one single data. Probably I'll add one more data instead of making a simplified one. I'll do one more thing. It's going to be a subject student thing, right? So just I'll give a subject. Okay, so I'm going to give a I'm going to insert an object which is going to contain the particular student name and his subject. So I'm going to say the student, or sorry, I gave a subject name as item something, right? Okay. Student name is called n, subject is going to be yes. So I'm going to make a request to add a particular object to the particular object store. In other words, I'm trying to make a request to insert my record to a particular table. It is a standard word as we use in standard query language. But whereas in IndexedDB, I'm not going to say it as a table, I'm going to say object store. So in the object store, one particular object store where I'm trying to make a request to add a particular object which contains the student name and the student field. Remember, I'm not adding a one called item ID, which will be automatically get added if at all it works. Let's see. First we have to make sure the request goes successful. Sorry, event result. I don't know what really going to come as a result. Let's see if that works. So when I'm going to click on the button called add name, it's going to take the user input value like name field and subject field will be created as an object, and that object is going to be inserted into an object store called name table. Already have a DB transaction or read write permission, so of course I can manipulate, I can insert a value. Let's see how things goes on. I pray I don't get error in this case. I like object. Which line? Navigation. So closed. So event. Okay. I have another way to verify whether my data is inserted or not. I'm going to write one more function. I'm really not sure. I'm just going to block this part. Still, I don't have any error, but I need to know how. I need to know whether it has got successfully inserted or not. By my callback method did not work, but I have another way to find whether the data inserted or not. Get all names. Going to write another method to retrieve all the names of particular student. Same thing I need to do one thing. Need a permission of, need to initialize the transaction. In this case I'm going to go read only, because I'm going to simply read what is existing one. I'm not going to need a modifying permission. In this case object store instance is the same. I'll make another request. Object store has one more object called open cursor. A cursor is an object as usual, but it is a result set, mean it contains the whole instance of your particular object store, mean it has all the data. One single object, maybe an array also, I don't know, because I need to see how the open cursor going to do, or what kind of object is going to give me. But one thing, the cursor is, if you are familiar with your Java web application or maybe web development, you would have seen the database connector had an object called result set. It is similar to it. This result set will contain all the records our particular object store has. So using that, I'm going to try. I found an error. Actually, on success should have a function callback. That's the reason it did not work. Sometimes think intelligently, things won't work. In fact, I should have done the same there also. Anyway, we'll give some update. Event target result. Remember, when I have a asynchronous request, because my request, I said it would take time, so I have a callback method. So whenever requests receive a successful response, I'll be getting a callback in this function. This function will give me a result through an object called event, and that object is going to contain all the records. I'm going to wrap them everything. In this case, I'm going to use if condition instead of for loop, because I don't know what is the size of my cursor. And so just print the cursor what it is there, and continue the cursor until it get emptied. Mean cursor value is going to start from the top. As it executes, one point of time the cursor will get into a last element. When cursor is over, it won't call the continue method. So continue. So unless the cursor gets emptied, just keep running the if block. The continue line will make sure the iteration happens throughout until the cursor is emptied, or until the last item of the cursor is taken out. So I'm going to get all the names as soon as I insert a new name. So get all names mean once a new item is inserted, it will go through this particular function. This function will call, open the object store, retrieve an object called a cursor. That cursor is going to have all the instance of your object store. So we're going to see that. I need to add a dummy record because I have connected with that. It's weird. One success. Oh my god. Result. Names. At least I'll have one more method to view all. Just added to a function started depending on this, because the request callback I should have written this way. Anyway, I've added one more button which will retrieve all the records which is added. See, this is a cursor. I think it's a quite complex data type. I'll open one. The primary key is having number 5. I'm interested in one object called value. Yeah, here it is. My item ID 5, student name Raj, student subject math has got added. So let me see the other cursor. I think all are having item ID 5. That's really strange. Okay. Okay, I think something got wrong here, so I'm going to change my database. So this is particularly useful. Instead of simply changing the version number, I'll simply recreate the database. So I'll verify why things did not go well. The key path I had it as an item ID and auto increment set to true. Table, create object store. Looks fine for me. Refresh one more time. Now the primary key is 1. Now it works. See, the primary key has got an incremental value. So if you do not get expected results, it's better to change the database name. Maybe something got messed up while I explained something. So I have a unique key, primary key automatically added. I think it's all changing. Cursor. Got updated. Don't think slightly. Instead of typing the all one cursor, the value object alone I'll print, because the value is going to contain the object. Primary key is having the right one, but I do see some other issues within the object. It is having item ID 3 repeated throughout, but even though the key has got updated. But let me verify one more time. Refresh, getting all the items. Now looks good. I think it's fine now. So student name, the first student name is Vasu, and that's to math it has an item ID 1, and the second one is Dave, and that's item ID has got updated automatically. It has got primary index auto incremented value automatically added. I don't need to hereafter read the array value and manually assign the particular ID to an object hereafter. The database will handle the job now. I'll add one more record. I just cleared not to get confused, because last time just got confused because of what kind of ID which overlapped each other. So added them. So the last person name is also got added, and having an unique item ID for all. So this item ID, even though when I add the particular record, I did not have the particular object called item ID. I just added the student name and the student subject alone. But whereas the object store automatically added one more field called item ID, and it assigned a unique value to the particular object. So remember, only 2 object key value I added, but the third one automatically got updated. So this maintains the uniqueness of your record. If you have the same duplicate name, for example, Dinakar, I'm inserting one more time. If you see this particular case, this clearly maintains the originality. So you won't get an overlapping instance of the particular record. So it maintains a uniqueness. So this is particularly very helpful. I don't need to have manual verification whether the user is inserting the same record or is maintaining a new record or something else. So I can directly add them as well. So new ID 5, 6 has got added. So automatically everything goes as expected. Okay, get all items done. I think now I need to display them because we are simply seeing the console. That may not be a useful thing. I would prefer to display them in the table. We have append. It will do a row. We need to add 3 rows, I remember. So 3 columns. Cursor value item ID, because if I see it is called item ID, so item ID plus one column done and another column start. Cursor value student stu name, I remember what the name I gave. This column over. Right, in our line by line. So stu subject and the table row gets over. So every time it iterates through it, it will get the table instance and it will add a new row with the given cursor value. But before manipulating, I need to make sure the table gets emptied so that it works as if a refresh. Otherwise, it will manipulate with the existing as I keep adding. Let's see. Does it work still? Okay, this table append. So fine. Comes. So the value which has been added here but empty, why it should not work? I'll do one thing. Instead of empty, being, I'll keep it. Any error comes, we'll see. So the value has got added, so new one. This is a problem, even though because I tried to empty it, but did not work. But let me see. So it added the additional record, which is displaying as well here. So let me fix this one. Table append. I'll keep it here instead of callback method slightly. It works now. So because the additional one we have added here. So get all names being called here as well. On success, get all names being called. It looks fine for me. This is something going weirdly wrong. Object and subject. The obvious reason is this request should be local. We already have a request object, global object here, so it got confused with that. So this is fine. Global spec, so I better could have given a different name, but even though I made it local now, so it should work. Still not inserting. You verify whether it goes successfully or not. I get my database inserting perfectly, but one part I couldn't identify. When add goes successful, I need to get a callback in this method, but when I call get all names, it's not giving me the expected result. This works perfect. Not understand. It's there. I'm getting the 13th inserted successfully, but it is not displaying here. This is tell as a data successfully inserted. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this one. Going to call outside. Okay, I'll come back to it. But anyway, the results are getting added, so that's still a expected result. Only thing I couldn't update properly when I click on add item, but whereas when I get all item, it works perfect. One thing, we are adding an object, and the item ID is being added automatically, and I don't need to maintain the uniqueness of the record. So whatever item I get added, even though a particular object, which is if I want to specifically retrieve the particular object, even though it contains the same name, same subject, but in one way it will be unique. It will have an item ID declared on every instance where you try to add. So when I have this particular part automated, I don't need to manually maintain the index of the record. So it will be particularly helpful for me in my previous project where I need to click a particular item, then it goes for editing. Now I can easily edit also because I know the item ID of the particular record. So I can directly edit it, and that edit will become permanent. Editing, I may need some way. Name, object store, transaction, DB request. So we'll add one more. In fact, I added this for we'll add one more field, a button to edit. Add one more button for delete. So I've added additional buttons. So clicking edit is going to give me an access to edit the particular record, and delete will remove the record. Function. I need one more function. I need to escape the string. It means this particular function edit name subject is going to have an argument called item ID. So using the item ID I can retrieve the content, but I'm going to just retrieve the editing and deleting part. I'll take it up to the lunch break, because further if I continue things will go pretty longer. So first I'll retrieve the item, then we'll leave it. So I need to get a transaction. First parameter being an array. So the name what I gave here, name table. I may need read write permission because edit delete. So editing is going to involve modifying. So read write an object store. Object store. Which particular object store you're trying to modify? It's name table. Okay. Sorry. Request to retrieve an item called object store get the particular ID, and as usual request on sucks. Trying to retrieve the particular object which got clicked. So it only call the method, will print the console output. We'll see how I can edit it in the UI, but before I just want to see whether it works or not. Getting all the items, I'm clicking on edit. If you notice the particular record alone being taken out, so whatever item I click, the specific record being taken out, because every iteration of the element is having a particular item ID repeated. If you notice this TD edit object having the item ID, so every UI of this particular app is having a function called edit name subject having an argument which is nothing but the primary key. So using that I can particularly get the specific record. So because the index are being maintained automatically, so I can try them. So clicking the specific record, we have just make it work. Similarly, if I click the delete, the particular record could be deleted. That's pretty simple, but we will do that maybe after the break. It's already 1:10 now. So I'll leave you guys for a break. We'll continue the rest in the afternoon session.